Hey everybody, it's Innovision, and I've spent over 2 months putting this video together. I'm sharing my adventures of tinkering with the AMD BC250. While there are many videos on the topic, none are like mine. In case you're wondering what the BC250 is, it's a compute board manufactured by ASRock for Bitcoin mining with a unique twist. It has a similar system-on-chip design as the PlayStation 5 and even shares the same APU. It in fact comes equipped with 16 gigs of DDR6 memory. And given the cost of memory these days, that's quite an asset depending on your situation. One of the endearing qualities of a project like this is that it still affords you a low-cost PC build that's a 1080p gaming beast. I'll be sharing gameplay along with the settings I'm using for many games throughout the video. I'll be sharing my experience with 2 different builds. One's completely air-cooled and one's liquid-cooled. I'll even be sharing how to set up the automated Cyan Skillfish Power Governor and how to roll out your own Linux kernel so you can enable all 40 compute units. Stick around, because you don't want to miss any of it. All right, so I've got my BC250 all hooked up here with the AIO liquid cooled solution, thanks to next gen 3D prints, and it's looking all spiffy in its case over here. We've got Raphael in the background mean mugging it, and we're hooked up to 120 hertz gaming monitor. When my BC250 arrived, I didn't have a dedicated power supply, so I sort of hotwired it to an existing computer where I took advantage of my PCIe 8-pin power connector so I could just be able to turn the device on, make sure it works, because if it didn't, I would have to return it. But luckily it turned on and it posted, and from there I was able to boot into a custom environment and run a flash script to be able to flash a custom firmware to the board. And this is an absolute must if you plan on running Linux. By default, the stock BIOS on the BC250 has huge VRAM allocations, and we really want to set it to 512 megs. That way steamos, Bazzite, Cachy, or whatever Linux distro you're using will automatically allocate VRAM as needed, so you want to start out as small as possible. All right, let's take a look at Ratchet and Clank: A Rift Apart. This is another one of those fun, it's a PlayStation game that's been ported to PC, that's running on a PC-based operating system that's been ported to the PlayStation 5 system on chip. So here's the settings I like to use. Now this is a game that really pushes the available memory to the limits, but I'll use 1080p with the IGTI upscaling method, targeting quality, no dynamic resolution scaling. We could drop the display resolution to give back some memory, but I've been able to play this at least for 30 or 40 minutes without it crashing, so I think we're okay. As I'm playing the game, monitor the Steam performance overlay in the top left corner. We get things like the FPS, the CPU and GPU clock rate, as well as the RAM and VRAM utilization. At least as far as the game feels, it feels buttery smooth. I do notice that we never go below 60 FPS, and in some cases we can get up to about 100 or even 120 FPS. Usually big swings in performance would lead to feeling things like micro stutters and affect the quality of service of the game. And so while we do see a wide range of FPS, the game feels very smooth, and I don't have frame gen enabled. So this is really just the game running. One thing I want to make very clear here, this is not a project for somebody who's not comfortable with tinkering. So don't think that you're going to buy this and now all of a sudden you got a Steam machine or a Steam Deck. I think there's a lot of videos kind of over glorifying that it's a Steam machine. You can run SteamOS on it. I've run SteamOS, cachyos, and Bazzite OS. My personal favorite is running cachyos on this because you're still going to have to do a lot of tweaking and kernel module updates and things of that nature. cachyos is easier to wield than something like SteamOS. In fact, I've gotten the Power Governor running under SteamOS. I've got Elden Ring running locked in at 30 frames per second. I'd miss out on a lot of things like enabling the extra compute units, for example. And cachyos is based on Arch Linux, which is the same Linux base that SteamOS uses. So from a performance perspective, they're actually quite similar. The first thing I did when this arrived was kind of hotwire it to an existing PC just to power it on and just to make sure that it's working. That way, if it wasn't, I knew I needed to send it back. Now that I know it's working and I'm going to keep it, I really want to clean this up. There's so much dust here. So this has been running in a Bitcoin mine 24/7 and there's just dust caked on like in these ports. So I'm removing my NVMe SSD that I used for testing a couple of things. And you'll notice at the bottom here, we've got several screws. These hold the heatsink in place. Once I got the topmost heatsink off, I had to remove the bottom heatsink that has thermal pads for the DDR6 memory, and it was rather difficult to remove, but finally I was able to kind of pry it off gently, and there was so much dust caked on in there. I ended up replacing all of the thermal pads, both the ones on the DDR6 memory as well as the ones on the top of the board for the VRMs, and I found some really high quality ones that I replaced them with, but ultimately the ones that were installed on the card were too brittle and starting to flake and had so much dust embedded in them. I also cleaned the entire card with isopropyl alcohol. So I used Q-tips to swab in the ports. I used a paper towel to kind of gently dab off all the dust on the top of the board. I also had to clean up the thermal paste off the APU, which was extremely crusty and dry at this point. Now I want everyone to keep this in perspective. All of this was to be able to test my completely air-cooled solution using the small Pocket Adventures 3D printed case. For implementing the liquid-cooled solution using next-gen 3D prints models, I end up having to remove all of the top heatsink and replace all the heat sinks on the VRMs with smaller ones used for things like Raspberry Pis, and ended up looking something like this when it was finished. To be able to use the AIO liquid cooled CPU mount, I ended up having to 3D print a CPU socket adapter to adapt it to the AM4 socket type. The one you just saw being printed was the next gen 3D prints LGA adapter, but I ended up trying many different CPU socket adapters. I even tried a completely air-cooled solution along the way that looked like this. This one's an AM4 CPU cooler. After I put the whole thing together, I realized I mounted the fan upside down, but sometimes these things happen. At least for the first of many times that I took this thing apart and reassembled it, this is what it looked like before I ended up installing it in my 3D printed Pocket Adventures case. All right, let's take a look at Elden Ring. So I've got the game running at 1080p with the maximum settings. So one thing I noticed while playing Elden Ring is it starts off kind of slow, and as the Cyan Skillfish Power Governor starts to adapt itself for the game will start to render a little bit faster and things kind of catch up. But it only takes a few seconds of kind of walking around, maybe no more than like 10 seconds, and it feels like it's running smooth. Under SteamOS, I get nearly 60 FPS the whole time I'm playing it. And I picked this area of the game intentionally because it has a lot of stuff that it's drawing at a distance, and so it's taxing and there's a lot of layers going on here. Using cachyos is extremely important for a setup like this, or Bazite, for example, is important for a setup like this because there's always new kernel patches and updates, and SteamOS doesn't tend to get these updates. Finally, SteamOS has a kernel version that has the patches needed to run the BC250 board, so it's a little bit slower. And if I want to try the latest and greatest stuff, like enabling all 40 compute units, you need to roll out your own kernel, and it's a lot more comfortable in a distribution like cachyos. In general, I'm very pleased with how well Elden Ring runs on this hardware. Yeah, we might drop to about 45 FPS during these more demanding parts of the game, but it's totally worth it. And it feels smooth. The game is it's beyond playable. It feels good. And it looks great. We have everything turned up to the maximum settings. You used to be able to pick up one of these boards for about $50 to $70, but due to recent popularity, it's jumped anywhere between $130 to $200. Even with this price jump, it still makes a very viable, low-budget PC build. For example, I wouldn't pay more than $130 for one of these boards. This case is made by Pocket Adventures, and in total, you can build it out for less than $250. You only need the BC250. I spent maybe about $10 or $15 in filament, and you need a power supply, as well as two 120mm computer fans. I would recommend fans that move large volumes of air. You can go with high-end fans like Nakatua, or you could use Thermalright fans. Even if you don't have a 3D printer, there's no reason you couldn't put this together. I've seen several folks even put one of these in a shoebox. I've seen some people just put it on their desk with a power supply hooked up to it. So even if you don't have a 3D printer or can't afford a case for it, you could always start out with just the basic things, the power supply, a fan, and the board, and then build it out later. Let's check out some gameplay of Pragmata. So let's take a look at our settings real quick. So you notice on the right-hand side here, we've got a graphics memory process load, or how much graphics memory we're using, right? And so I've got the resolution locked at 1080p. I have global illumination set to low. I'm using FSR1 as the upscaler, and I'm targeting quality. Now I've noticed on other AMD devices, for whatever reason, FSR3 doesn't look as good to me. Now FSR3 is a temporal upscaler, whereas FSR1 uses information from the spatial domain. And so I've just seen it giving crisper images in this game. And I do have frame gen enabled. And we've got medium for our hair quality, texture quality set to low. Shadow quality is also medium. And you can see the rest of the settings here. And you can try tweaking it. We want to stay less than that 5 gigabytes of texture memory or graphics memory that we have allocated. And so that looks good. You can see right now, before we even get into the game, we're running well above 100 frames per second. And so in our home base area, I mean, the game looks good. The visual quality looks crisp. It's very responsive. We're well over 150 frames a second. So I could push things further if we increased our graphics memory. But if you take a look at our VRAM and RAM allocation in our Steam performance overlay over here, we're pretty close to that 16 gigs. So we're living right on the edge. If we push it any higher, the game will start crashing. All right, so let's take a look at a battle scene.
The sector guard is a real upgrade compared to the other bots we've seen. We could try using decode to soften him up a bit.
Okay, whatever it takes, don't hold back.
One of the remarkable things about the BC250 project is that you can truly keep the cost down. For example, you don't need to go all in with an AIO liquid cooled solution. You can simply throw it on your desk with a power supply hooked up to it and have a fan blowing on it, as long as it's flush mounted with the heatsink. When what you see here, I've 3D printed a few tools to help me open up all the fins to improve the air circulation. So I ended up building out 2 versions of this. One is a completely air-cooled solution, and one is using the AIO liquid cooled solution. Now, I'm not even going to compare them. There's no comparison. The liquid cooled version is superior in every way, and it should be, because it was a well thought out, well engineered case. And again, I'm thankful for the community and folks like Next Gen 3D Prints for building out this case and offering it for free for everyone that wants to try it. That's simply remarkable. By using tools like the Cyan Skillfish Power Governor, you can actually get stable performance on a completely air-cooled version of this build. You might have to bring the clock rate down and the amount of power down, but it's worth it because it keeps everything cool and you won't hit that thermal throttling, and you keep the BC250 running in the range that's safe for long-term operation. And that's what I'm doing with my second unit, my completely air-cooled model. I'm actually going to be giving to my kids. I have just a couple more things I want to do with it before I hand it off to them. But this is going to be a way for us to be able to play Steam games together over the summer, and I'm truly looking forward to that. All right, let's take a look at God of War. And this game actually fits comfortably in the amount of memory at this resolution of 1080p.
But why would a fire troll burn Mother's garden? And since when are trolls so close to the house? And what was that frozen thing that attacked them?
I do not know. Now be silent. We are almost home.
AIO cooled version of this cost me about $36 in filaments and other materials, and this build will cost closer to about $330 to $350 to put together. This case that supports the AIO cooler was designed by Next Gen 3D Prints. I absolutely love this case. It is so cool. My temperatures stay at 60 degrees Celsius or less the whole time I'm playing, no matter what I'm doing. I've even overclocked it a little bit and stay with beautiful temperatures. One thing I want to note is that this one's a little bit more of an advanced build, and I'm gracious for the fact that Next Gen 3D Prints shared this model for free for anyone to use. I would say that the Pocket Adventures case is a little bit more straightforward. If you just want to throw the BC250 in there, a power supply, and a couple of fans, you're ready to go. But if you enjoy tinkering and you want to optimize things, there's so much joy from putting this one together. For installing the Power Governor, we're going to want to open up a console, and there's a few commands that we're going to have to type into our console. I'll share those in the description of the video. But now what I would like to do is start from a place where you've already installed the Power Governor, and I'm going to show you how to properly configure it. With the Cyan Skillfish Power Governor installed, we're going to open the config file where we can adjust things like the temperatures that start the thermal throttling and start ramping the power back down. For my air-cooled build, I like to start the throttling at 75 degrees Celsius, and the recovery starts when we hit 70 degrees Celsius. This next step requires a little bit of experimentation on your end, and this is this concept of safety points, which is a clock frequency and voltage pair. For air-cooled builds, I'd recommend not going over 2000 megahertz and 1000 in the voltage. Once you're done with your edits, save the file and restart the Cyan Skillfish Power Governor service.
It's not fair. He doesn't know anything.
You lost control.
That thing was trying to kill us. It's not like you don't get angry in a fight.
Anger can be a weapon. If you control it, use it. You clearly cannot. When you...
I haven't been sick in a long time. I'm better now.
Fine. Come on then.
You want me to hit you?
I want you to try.
Ow! What are you...
Try again.
Why are you doing that?
Too slow. Try again.
Cut it out!
Weak. Again. Again.
Stop it!
Again. Your anger, you can get lost in it. The path ahead is difficult. And you, Atreus, are clearly not ready.
Let's take a look at my assembled BC250 case that has accommodations for a water cooler or AIO cooler. I printed out an AM4 socket. Now this particular case comes with a different socket adapter, but this is just one that I already printed from something else, and so I was able to make use of it. I've got my VRMs covered with small heat sinks. I didn't find the exact size I was looking for. I end up having to cut them to make them fit. What we see right here in the foreground, this is an adapter that allows you to plug in serial ATA power from your power supply, and then you've got this little knob here. We can adjust the amount of power if your fans support pulse width modulation. I've got the ability to hook up 4 extra fans, so I'm going to mount right here. Another thing I want to call out, at the bottom here, this part of the back plate, this heatsink underneath the BC250 board that's cooling the DDR6 memory, I've added additional heat sinks right here. And these are just aluminum heat sinks with additional adhesive. It was running quite hot before this. Now it's actually quite cool. Rather than use the 180 degree USB inlet, I just feed a USB cable all the way out, and this provides my side USB ports here, so you can hook in a keyboard, mouse, Bluetooth adapter, etc. Alright, so I got one 80mm fan mounted in there. It's not beautiful. It's kind of a snug fit, but once all is said and done, this panel will go right over it, and you won't really see it.
What was that?
Quiet.
hiding anymore. I know who you are.
What's going on? Do you know him?
More importantly, I know what you are.
Boy, beneath the floor. Now.
But you told me never to go down there. Who is that?
I do not know.
What's he talking about?
I do not know. Get in.
Just tell me what I want to know. No need for this to get bloody.
I thought you'd be bigger. But you're definitely the one. Long way from home, aren't you?
What do you want?
Oh, you already know the answer to that.
Whatever it is you seek, I do not have it. You should move on.
And here I thought your kind was supposed to be so enlightened, so much better than us, so much smarter. And yet you hide out here in the woods like a coward.
You do not want this fight.
As I've mentioned before, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. Here my controller disconnected because I'm using an incompatible Bluetooth controller. And at a climactic part.
I'm pretty sure I do.
Leave my home.
You are going to have to kill me for that to happen.
I warned you.
Finally.
You would not listen.
Getting all 40 compute units enabled is fairly straightforward. It does require recompiling the Linux kernel. Now I'm using cachyos. You'll have to follow the guide that pertains to the distribution that you're using. But the first thing we're going to want to do is head over to desktop mode. And so I'm using the Decify edition of cachyos. That way my console will automatically start in game mode. But Doug made this BC250 40CU unlock. So there's a few forks of this repository. We're going to want to clone this one. And so you'll just copy this HTTPS URL from the code button here. You'll open a terminal under System Console. So you'll type in git clone and then paste the URL. And it'll clone it. And we're just going to go ahead and head into that folder. And you see it's got all the files here. I just want to call out, every time there's a Linux kernel update, you're going to have to roll out your own custom kernel. Now I noticed that there's a fork where the author is trying to make a dynamic kernel module that can be loaded every time there's an update. I haven't gotten this to work yet. I'll report my findings, once I have a chance to play with it a little bit more. But for now, we're going to focus on compiling the kernel. Also, my hope is that they're able to patch this into the Linux kernel source tree, and then it'll just become the default with new kernels going forward. But at any rate, now that we've cloned our repository, we're going to want to start the cachyos utility for building a kernel. And so it's called Kernel Manager, or cachyos Kernel Manager. So you'll start it up here, and you'll see when it comes up, it's already populated with the defaults of the kernel that you're booted off of. And so in my case, I'm running Linux cachyos Decify, and it's the 709 kernel. And so we'll go ahead and click Configure here. And before we do anything else, we're going to want to go to Patches here. And you'll see there's already a patch that's getting pulled from the cachyos GitHub. We're going to want to add a local patch. So click Local Patch, and we're going to go into this BC250 40CU unlock. And then in there's a folder called Patch. We're going to want to grab this one, BC250-40CU-AMD GPU patch. Double click that. And then we're going to go back to options here. And if you want to build this more than once, I would recommend go ahead and save this you would just name it whatever you want. In my case, I already have one, so I'm just gonna override it. And at this point, we can click build kernel. We'll click build kernel, and it's gonna start by extracting the kernel from the cachyos repository. Now this step will take 40 to 50 minutes depending on thermal throttling and anything like that. So you'll just let this run. And so at this point, I'd recommend getting your favorite snack, your favorite beverage, and kick back and relax for a little while. But let it run through its whole courses. In my case, I already built the kernel, so it's probably going to go a lot quicker. In fact, I'll even cancel out of it at this point. But once this is done, it will prompt you for the admin or root password. You'll type in your password, and it's going to ask you, do you want to install the packages? It'll pop back up in a UI like this one, and you'll click yes, install the packages. And once that's done, you'll actually have all 40 CUs enabled once your console reboots. I want to show you what that looks like. So there's a few commands that we can run to see that all 40 compute units are enabled. And I'm actually just pulling this right off of Doug's GitHub. And the first thing we're going to want to do is this dmessage command. So we'll type in sudo dmessage, and it's going to grep on the active number of compute units. And you can see here, yay verily, we have 40 of them enabled. Remember, by default, only 24 are enabled. And we want to make sure that the register writes are correctly enabled. So we're going to dmessage on this. And we can see here mode 3, so everything's enabled. And then the last thing we're going to want to check is the Radeon driver. And we can see we've got 40 compute units here. So everything is up and running. There's another really neat way to look at this. You can check the number of compute units enabled. So by default, when you run this CU map, you're going to see 4 rows with 4 items disabled for each row. And look at this, all of them are filled in on mine because all 40 are active. So that looks great. And there's another note here about thermal throttling. You're going to want to use the Cyan Skillfish Governor, which I show how to set up in this video as well. They recommend using the safe point of 1500 megahertz and 900 millivolts. In my case, I'm running with a little bit more aggressive settings because my BC250 is AIO cooled. Next up, let's take a look at Diablo 4. So again, we're running windowed, full screen, 1080p. We don't have HDR enabled. So we've got FSR2 with balanced. Let's go ahead and crank that up to quality. If you take a look at our performance overlay in the top left there, we're already pretty close to the full 16 gigs that we have on this board. So I'm not going to push the quality preset up beyond that. These defaults are fine. Most of these are defaults. I just changed the FSR to quality mode. But you can see the game's running at 120, well, close to 120 FPS. There's a little stutter here on my other devices when I get to this part. I think it's the network code in this game. But it didn't stutter here on the BC250. Now let's go fight some stuff. As I'm playing Diablo 4, I can't help but feel even today the BC250 board is a great investment if you're looking for a budget value build. I know the prices have gone up considerably since all the YouTubers have already been reporting on this technology, but my recommendation is if you could find one for 130 bucks or less, it's still a great deal, especially if you have access to a 3D printer and you have some computer parts already in your supplies. I would say that the biggest investment would be the board itself. I mean, heck, technically you don't really need a case to put it in at all. I've seen folks put it in a shoebox, for example. What you really need is the board itself, a power supply, and a Bluetooth dongle and a game controller. That's pretty much all you need to get started. Oh, and we can't forget a good fan that pushes a lot of air. Out of curiosity, who out there has tried this or is planning to try this? Don't be shy, drop a comment, let me know how it went, or if you have any questions, let me know. You can always join us on Discord. That's where all the cool cats hang out. If there are any games you want me to test on this hardware or look into optimizing the settings further, drop a comment, let me know, let's have a discussion about it. Like I said before, one of the most endearing qualities about this project is the total cost. Yes, the cost of the BC250 has gone up in recent months, but you still can put together a very powerful 1080p gaming solution for less than 300 bucks. Still costs less than a PlayStation 5 costs or an Xbox. And it definitely costs less than a 1080p gaming PC. And the community support is phenomenal. I'm happy I was able to flash the BIOS correctly the first time, because if it failed, I'd end up having to bust out my Flash programmer and it would end up taking a whole lot longer. The BC250 community is amazing, and there is no shortage of documentation. In fact, there's this BC250 GitHub documentation that has everything from OS installation to flashing your device. And on top of all that, I find the BC250 subreddit an amazing group of people. It's one of the nicest subreddits I've actually been on. You know how it goes on Reddit sometimes. Folks can be snarky. You get a couple of keyboard warriors, but I haven't encountered any of that on the BC250 subreddit. Hats off to you folks. And I can't forget the BC250 Discord. It's always got something going on there. It's always hopping, and there's plenty of resources and folks to have interesting conversations with. In case you get a wild hair and decide to pick up a BC250 yourself, I just wanted to share this vast community and the resources that are out there. In case you run into any problems, you know where you can find out more information, and I'll have links to all of this in the description of the video. Constant advancements and improvements are being made daily. I see this being something that people are tinkering with for years to come. Much like the modding scene for the original Xbox is still around, this board's here to stay. As long as you have a board that posts, you're good to go. Until next time, hit that like button and subscribe. That way you don't miss all the amazing tech, toys, and gaming tips we've got coming down the pipeline.